lies an invisible umbrella. It is generated by the churning of molten iron and nickel deep within the core, a giant dynamo that has been running for billions of years. It deflects the solar wind, bends cosmic rays, and guides deadly radiation from deep space toward the poles, where it becomes the auroras we see in the night sky. Without this umbrella, Earth would be a very different place. Mars once had water and an atmosphere. After its global magnetic field disappeared, the solar wind slowly stripped away its protective layer. Today, the surface of Mars is a red desert, its atmosphere too thin to support liquid water. For tens of thousands of years, bees, pigeons, whales, salmon, and green sea turtles have depended on this umbrella to survive. Their bodies contain ancient compasses, guiding them from birthplace to feeding ground and back again. Paths so precise they seem like they were measured by a theodolite. To put it in a more brutal way, when the handle of this umbrella begins to reverse, Earth's biological navigation systems will fail. Migratory birds will fly the wrong way. Sea turtles will never find their nesting beaches. Whales will become lost in unfamiliar seas. But the true doomsday scenario has never been written for albatrosses. It is buried in the control rooms of power grids, lying in the encrypted channels of satellites, hiding behind the few inches of glass in your pocket. The screen that tells you where to go, which way to turn, what time to leave. And now, scientists are observing an accelerating decline in geomagnetic intensity. Over the past nearly 2 centuries, the strength of Earth's magnetic field has dropped by 10%. In the last 7 years, a second minimum zone, with even faster decay, has appeared to the east of the South Atlantic anomaly, weakening by about 600 nanoteslas in 7 years, roughly 1/10 of the magnetic field strength on an adult human thumbnail. Our smartphones will eventually become compasses without a network. Only by then, no one will remember how to use a compass. The switch, a geomagnetic reversal, is not an explosion. It is a process so slow that it tests human patience. Each reversal does not flip the field instantaneously. Instead, the field weakens first, then becomes chaotic, and finally slowly grows back in the opposite direction. The last complete long-duration reversal occurred about 780,000 years ago and lasted nearly 20,000 years. The duration of reversals varies widely. Over the past 170 million years, the magnetic poles have reversed 540 times, with most reversals taking about 10,000 years. Sometimes things happen even more slowly. Scientists have found that a reversal about 40 million years ago took over 70,000 years to complete. But the truly frightening part is not the reversal itself. It is the transition that precedes it. The peak of Earth's magnetic decay does not occur during the reversal, but in the centuries before it. In the period leading up to a reversal, the field strength once dropped to about 6% of its current level. By the time the reversal actually happened, the intensity had risen back to 28%. 6%. In other words, humanity's electromagnetic shield would have almost completely dissolved on those century-long scales. And it is precisely during these invisible, intangible, mostly unknown metastable windows that the fate of modern civilization will be decided. If you placed a compass on a table during that time, the needle would no longer point north. It would shudder, swing, and slowly trace circles in place, like a stopped clock. The briefness of a century and the longness of 70,000 years. 2 scales are in conflict. Human civilization counts time in centuries. A geomagnetic reversal counts time in tens of millennia. It takes a few years to lay an undersea fiber optic cable. A satellite is designed to last a few decades. A power grid is designed to last a few decades. The cooling systems of nuclear plants, the fiber optic networks of financial transactions, the atomic clocks that provide GPS timing, all of this infrastructure was built in an era when the magnetic field was still strong enough. The Earth's magnetic field, however, does not consult humanity's calendar. This has placed modern civilization in a dilemma no one anticipated. We invented hyperconnectivity, but we locked all our safety behind a shield that could shrink at any moment. Fragility. The most devastating blow of a geomagnetic reversal would fall first on the power grid. When the magnetic field weakens, charged particles from the solar wind more easily penetrate the atmosphere and strike the Earth's surface. They do not create giant fireballs as in science fiction movies. Instead, they destroy the world in a quieter way. High-energy particles flood into high-voltage transmission lines, generating geomagnetically induced currents. These currents have nowhere to go. They rush into the copper windings of transformers, instantly saturating the iron cores and overheating the copper coils. A 100-ton transformer begins to melt from the inside. A Grumman report cites science journalist Mitchell, who in his book The Spinning Magnet wrote that a reversal could destroy any electronic device, including household appliances, satellites, wireless equipment, and power grids, and could even trigger cascading blackouts lasting decades. This is not speculation. In 1989, a moderate geomagnetic storm knocked out Quebec's power grid for 9 hours. That storm carried only a tiny fraction of the energy that would occur during the full weakening of the magnetic shield. If the entire shield were disappearing, the grid would be exposed to continuous high-energy particle bombardment for decades or even a century. How hard is it to recover? A destroyed transformer must be custom-ordered, transported, and installed. Only a handful of factories in the world can produce such extra high-voltage transformers, and the waiting period is measured in years. When one transformer burns out, the entire regional grid loses support, triggering a cascading collapse. When an entire generation of transformers fails, and all backup stocks are exhausted, and then the production capacity itself is exhausted, for the first time, the machines of modern civilization will stop turning. By then, your phone will have no signal. Not because the cell towers are shut down, because the microcircuits on your phone's motherboard will have been pierced by particles, causing irreversible bit flips in the logic gates. That is not the kind of damage like a cracked screen. Your phone will become a silent, immobile brick. The cost. A grid collapse does not kill people directly, but it kills them indirectly. No electricity means no water pumps, no cold chains, no hospital operating rooms, no food processing lines. Modern urban water pumps and sewage treatment plants all depend on the grid. Within 48 hours of a blackout, high-rise residential buildings will lose water. Healthcare depends on the cold chain for blood and vaccines. After 7 days without power, insulin and antibiotics begin to degrade. When the cold chain breaks, diabetics face mortal danger. Food reserves and refrigeration systems can only hold out for a limited time after a blackout. Once the cold chain fails, meat, dairy, and vaccines must be discarded within hours. When fresh food runs out, some regions may face shortages. Transportation paralysis, banking shutdowns, police communication breakdowns. Order will not collapse instantly, but at every broken link, it will fester, slowly, inexorably. Scientists estimate that during a geomagnetic reversal, the additional deaths caused by elevated cosmic radiation could reach as high as 100,000 per year. That number of deaths, 100,000, makes the statistic feel distant and cold. But translated into each country, each city, each hospital bed, they are real people calling for help in real darkness. The astronauts fear. The International Space Station orbits at an altitude of about 400 kilometers, still within the protection of the magnetosphere. But as the magnetic field weakens, the radiation belts will descend and low-orbit satellites will be exposed to much higher radiation doses. The 31 satellites of the GPS system, the 66 low-orbit satellites of the Iridium system, all of them lie within Earth's radiation belts, with no atmosphere as a second shield. When a high-energy particle passes through a satellite's processor chip, it might do nothing, or it might flip the value of a critical register from 0 to 1. This phenomenon is called a single-event upset. It is the ghost that aerospace engineers dread most. A single-event upset may not kill a satellite immediately, but it can cause position calculation errors, and then the entire navigation system will begin to output coordinates that are off by several meters. You might think a few meters of error is not a big deal, but ships entering port require sub-meter precision. Aircraft auto-landing requires decimeter precision. The centimeter-level positioning of self-driving cars is built on high-precision GPS corrections. When those numbers begin to drift, people's reaction will not be, the magnetic field is reversing, run. It will be, why is my phone's GPS so inaccurate again? Satellites will be the first to fall. Humans have not yet invented cheap commercial chips that can withstand continuous high-energy particle bombardment, nor can they build onboard computers that never make errors. After the signals start drifting, all high-precision timing systems will become erratic. Grid dispatch depends on GPS timing. Financial transactions depend on network timing. Cell towers rely on GPS for clock synchronization. When time goes wrong, every protocol based on time will start to misalign. This is not a targeted cyber attack from a hacker. This is the entire physical universe forcing the world into an expensive, information-deft breakdown. Unresolved. The problem is that no one knows exactly when a geomagnetic reversal will begin, nor how many years it will take to complete. Scientists can only search for a fuzzy answer in existing observational data. Models predict that the movement speed of the North Magnetic Pole has slowed somewhat in recent years, from about 41 kilometers per year between 2020 and 2025 to an estimated 35 kilometers per year in the future. This might give civilization a slightly wider buffer window. But a slowdown does not erase the fundamental unpredictability. The core question is, what will happen to the atmospheric ozone layer when the magnetic field disappears? History has already given us a grim preview in the Lost Champ event, a geomagnetic excursion tens of thousands of years ago, when a sharp drop in field strength coincided with the extinction of Australian megafauna. The ozone layer was riddled by radiation, and ultraviolet flux soared, hitting surface life directly. Some scientists speculate that humans during that period began to use caves more intensively and used large amounts of red ochre in cave paintings, possibly as protection against ultraviolet exposure. The radiation flux during a reversal is not evenly distributed across the globe. It favors mid to low latitudes. This means Earth may not enter a global oven mode, but large high radiation danger zones will appear, forcing humans to migrate inland and to higher latitudes. Cancer rates will rise. Mutation rates will increase. Not everyone will be able to adapt. The entire human species will face a severe survival filter on the scale of just a few generations. Yet there is a puzzling paradox. Geomagnetic reversals have occurred countless times in geological history, and life on Earth has never been completely erased. A review article by a Chinese Academy of Sciences team points out that while there is some temporal correlation between geomagnetic polarity reversals and evolutionary events, there is no obvious simple causal relationship. Reversals did bring environmental stress and drove some species to extinction and replacement, but they never halted the overall process of evolution. Life on Earth has survived for billions of years in environments with wildly fluctuating radiation flux. Only that survival is not something everyone would accept. Looking outward, whether humanity, like the ancient species of the past, can survive the next period of magnetic chaos through migration and adaptation depends on one question. Can we manage a society of 8 billion people without relying on modern technology? No one knows the answer. It has never been tested. Current observations suggest that the weakening of the magnetic field in the South Atlantic anomaly looks more like a cyclical phenomenon that has been ongoing for millions of years, rather than a definite precursor to an imminent reversal. Some researchers believe that this anomaly will slowly dissipate, or may shift westward again, but what it reveals about the deep mantle structure is far more complex than previously understood. This means scientists are still far from mastering the timeline of geomagnetic reversals, let alone predicting the trigger mechanism. The evidence in scientists' hands is simply insufficient to determine whether the next reversal will occur in 500 years or 5,000 years. This gives humanity a vague buffer window, and it gives civilization a choice. Either spend money to harden infrastructure, relying on redundancy to survive an electromagnetic crisis, or gamble that the reversal will not happen within our own lifetimes. But the creatures that depend on the magnetic field for navigation do not gamble. They were born with their migration routes etched into the ancient compass of the Earth. When the North Magnetic Pole leaves Canada and drifts toward Siberia, they may still be following a program written 1,000 years ago, chasing a pole that no longer exists. If one night comes and the aurora lights up the entire sky, shining down on whales stranded on unfamiliar shores because their navigation failed, you will not call that beautiful. You will call it a silent judgment. Earth's shield is thinning. Every red dot on your phone's location service is negotiating with the same invisible force.